also
So
need to set up
live.
record. Yeah,
It is
sweet.
recording, yeah. So the cleaned, polished, professional version of ourselves, right?
Oh, like 10 minutes went by super quickly.
Yeah.
I hadn't realized it was this time already. Okay, everything's fine.
It's time to party.
That's why I was like, I feel like we should get Richard on. Let's do this.
Yep.
Let's go.
I just have to consciously, just like we talked about yesterday, consciously be slow, smiley, pretty deliberate in my wording. But sometimes I'm a little fluffy.
And then we start recording.
Hey, it started now, yeah, so it's on.
We are recording, so don't say anything incriminating.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll save my story for later then.
Yeah, good.
All right, looks like we've been 6 online, so welcome everybody.
Jody, will we know when people start to log in? Oh, yeah.
Yep, so we've got 6 in now.
Beautiful.
So I'm going to go ahead and launch our poll for everyone who's here. We would like to know where you guys are joining us from. All right, got someone in Austin, multiple people in Austin. Best city in the world, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah, of course. It's really the only one that matters. It should just be like Austin or someplace else.
Right, yeah. And I'm really not complaining about my spot for this webinar.
Right. Yeah. Is it snowing there?
Not anymore. It was snowing the past 2 days, and the sunshine today has pretty much melted all the snow away now.
That's good. Probably more what you were expecting there.
Yeah. I was super fortunate. Someone who was coming on the trip called and was like, "Hey, by the way, there's a blizzard coming in, so don't pack light. I know you probably mostly have crop tops and yoga pants, so prepare for heavier clothing."
What I was not prepared for was waking up this morning and it being, 53, 54 here in Austin. I thought, whoa, it felt amazing. It's warmed up a little bit now, but I loved being back to that for a little while.
Now you can go get your pumpkin spice latte.
Still too early for that. I think the first day of fall is what, September 22nd? And there should be a mandatory rule that you can't do pumpkin spice lattes until that point.
It's kind of like the McRib, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be just really special times for that.
That's true, man.
Do you guys know how they decide when to bring the McRib around?
How?
No.
It's when the price of pork drops. Which makes perfect sense, right? McDonald's is a very efficient company, so.
$3.99 McRib with a large fry and a tea. There you
That's
go.
right. Only if the price is right for them.
Well, welcome everybody joining. We do have a poll up. We would love to see where you guys are joining us from today. If you haven't already clocked your response into that poll, please do so.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll give everybody time to log in and grab their lunch or whatever they're going to do and, settle in. We'll start probably in a couple of minutes.
Awfully nice of these people to spend their lunch break with us.
For sure. Yeah. Hopefully this feeds their minds and their curiosity as well.
It somehow says I'm logging in again.
Why don't you show us what you're eating in the chat? Tell us what you're eating if you whip something up. I'm curious.
And maybe hungry.
There's Kelly.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi, Richard. It's nice to meet you. I've been on some of the email chains. I know we haven't met in person yet.
Nice to meet you.
We probably haven't met a lot of folks in person lately.
Yeah, not lately. Yeah. Someday. You know, I You know, when you're in college, you think about like all these different kind of philosophies, and one that really stuck with me was solipsism. Does anybody know what that is? It's the idea that, or the belief that you're the only real person that exists, and everyone else is a figment of your imagination. They're all produced in your mind.
I wonder that myself sometimes, Richard. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, and so I think this this virus only adds to that situation right now, because like people really only exist on your screen. They're not real life, right? So anyway,
it's almost like the Truman Show. You remember that, the Jim Carrey movie? It was okay, yeah. I guess, but it was definitely got you thinking. I don't think it's ever left me, because I was in the elevator riding up to work just today thinking, is this even real? What a crazy situation we find ourselves in at this point.
Yeah. So how are we doing on people that have joined?
We are at 13 attendees. We had somebody mentioning, Ben mentioned that he was possibly thinking about ordering some Freebirds, which sounds awesome to me.
Amazing. Good choice, Ben. And then we've got, so far, 80% of people have voted, which, hey, that's pretty good. Got an engaging crowd.
That is, wow.
Grubhub for the win, nice. Okay. Well, we're sitting right here in that sweet spot of about 5 minutes to let people get in. So as long as everyone's good to go, I'm going to end this poll and let you guys know that everyone so far is from Austin.
Wow.
Which makes sense. I think Austin Fraser, Austin team is based here in Austin. All of our connections, all of our network is based here in Austin. So it makes sense that the folks that we were excited to invite do come from our own turf, our own backyard. I'm sitting here on 2nd Street at the moment, and I guess I'll get this party started. I'm Zachary. I am the technology manager here at Austin Fraser. This is my 6th or 7th Leaders in Tech event that I've helped organize and coordinate. And we find ourselves today in a virtual setting for the first time ever. So kind of exciting to see that we were able to adapt to the times, just as so many, I guess all of us have had to do, whether that be working from home, attending webinars in our free time. Like I mentioned earlier, awfully nice of you guys to come and hang out with us on your lunch hour. That means a lot. Jody is our marketing coordinator here for the States. I'll let her do a brief introduction. She is working all the technical stuff in the background today.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Jody Gaines. I head up marketing for the US and the community events that you're seeing here. So I'm here to make sure things run smoothly, all your burning questions are answered, and to get you guys answering some of these cool, exciting polls we've got going on. And that is my dog crying for attention.
Hey, maybe your dog has a question?
Yeah.
He might.
All right, so let me tell everyone a little bit about Leaders in Tech, and then I will introduce our featured speaker today, Richard. Leaders in Tech is something that Austin Fraser runs in each one of the cities in which we operate globally, based currently in Germany, the UK, and here in the States. And we provide these sessions, Leaders in Tech, as a selection of specialists, localized communities, and topics for people that share similar skill sets to exchange ideas and opinions, and to learn and to trade war stories. We specifically focus on inviting CTOs, CIOs, directors, and heads of departments, really thought leaders that are also embedded in the communities in which we operate. And the folks that show up to these things are typically those that are motivated to help each other and also kind of help push the boundaries of what they're doing in their spaces. We have learned in our 5 years of operation here, specifically in Austin, that leading teams and driving strategy and pushing business into the unknown can oftentimes be an awfully lonely space. So especially in the tech world, we really do want to provide a trusted inner circle where leading tech professionals can connect with their peers, share experiences, seek advice, and learn. We know that technology is at the core of all of our clients' businesses, so we find people like Richard, we build these relationships, and we invite these people to share their experience, to share their knowledge with others. A little bit about Richard. Richard is someone that I have known for a few years now, and I have personally always admired his friendliness, his technical chops, his leadership skill, and ability to effectively communicate, especially for someone not technical like myself. It's awesome having a buddy like Richard in your pocket to help you navigate some of these things that you don't just quite understand. So a few weeks back, I started following Richard on Medium as he was writing articles geared specifically towards tech leadership. And I found one article in particular that scared me a little bit, especially being in the recruitment space. It was called Fire Your Engineering Team, or better yet, Make Them Productive. And as I read into it, the tagline caught my attention. But as I read into it, I thought, man, this is really, really interesting stuff. And through my relationships now with over 180 companies, specifically here in Austin, I thought, how many times have I heard these exact same sentiments echoed amongst my clients, my friends, my peers here in the Austin area? And I thought, well, we have a Leaders in Tech coming up here in September. I thought Richard would be awesome. And I spoke with him about if he'd be interested in speaking a little bit about his articles. And he was just as excited as I was. So we find ourselves here today. Richard is a Texas native. He's got over 20 years of experience working specifically in tech, from roles of director to VP of engineering, and most recently CTO. And his strength really is, as I'm sure you'll learn today, is communicating amongst leadership, stakeholders, engineering functions, and providing that harmony interorganizationally. So that being said, I think I'll pass the mic to Richard and let him tell us a little bit more about what inspired his writings, what inspired this topic, and what we expect to cover today. Richard?
Yeah, thanks so much. So, you know, I'm really honored to be on Leaders in Tech and to have you guys pick me and for us to have this session. So, you know, thank you very much. I hope it's really informative for everyone, and I'm happy to follow up with any other answers to questions that people may have after this, because I know we won't get around to everything. As Zach mentioned, you know, this really all started from this article that I wrote that got picked up by The Startup, which is a publication on Medium. And it happens to be the largest publication on Medium. It's 700,000 followers now. So that was really exciting. And yes, it's called Fire Your Engineering Team. And I cringe a little bit now that every time I hear that, because it's absolutely not what I want. It's just that it's something that I've heard over and over again from CEOs and CTOs, and it's not. I don't mention this to say for it to be divisive and for engineers out there to think like, oh God, they want to fire me. It's not that. It's usually hyperbole. And the thing is that you know, the engineering team is usually the highest paid team in the company, right? They're the highest non-commission paid group. And, you know, with that comes a lot of expectations. And it's a little bit, and I talk about this in my article, but it's a little bit like magic, the work that people do in engineering. You know, you take a beautiful design, something that the product is going to look like, and you make it work. And that is amazing. And when you're not a super technical, you know, leader or CEO, you know, you look at that and you think, you know, what I'm trading money, a lot of money, for magic. And when you don't know how the magic is made, and it doesn't come across, or you don't get out of it what you think you should, it's very frustrating. And I think it helps, you know, the engineering side to see that and go, yeah, I get that. You know, I get that we're spending a lot of money and we need to be producing. And so, you know, what I do is I try to demystify the magic, you know, and I'm really a bridge, you know, having spent time in engineering and having spent time as a leader, executive CTO for companies, you know, it's really, I think it puts me in a fortunate position to be sort of the bridge between the two and get them to understand each other's sides. But, you know, as it relates to this article and on this topic, you know, really getting CEOs to understand how things happen in engineering, and and how to measure progress. You know, what's really going on in engineering day to day, week to week, is really important because it makes it real for them, and it demystifies it, right? So it's no longer magic. It's something that they can look at and count on and measure. And when you can measure something, you know, then you can look at, how do I make it better? You know, what am I trading here for the money? And I think it helps everyone understand, you know, each other a lot better. So that's really my hope, is to create that harmony for everyone.
That's interesting, Richard. And like I alluded to earlier, specifically around how many people that we speak with on a daily or a weekly basis that encounter so many of the same issues, a lot of these now being emphasized or maybe highlighted as we find ourselves for the past 6.5 months in the situations that we find ourselves. I know that sometimes some of the mystical stuff behind what we're not always seeing or understanding from person to person oftentimes has a lot to do with effective communication. And that's something that I mentioned that you were kind of an expert at. And I was curious specifically on this topic, being now that we're remote, or even when we're in person back in the day or in the future, how, as an engineering leader, do you ensure good communication between leadership and engineering, other functions of the business? And in addition to that, what would be some of the tips or some of the tricks, the magic wand that you would use to promote effective communication?
Yeah, you know, that's a good question. It's got to be about the culture, and the culture of reading and writing. You know, that's really important. And it starts early, because one of the most important things is the communication between engineering team and leadership, and really engineering and the rest of the company, right? Because they all depend on engineering. And so, you know, I always tell people that it starts early. It starts when you're hiring for roles. And it's something that you can ask, you know, when you're interviewing. You can ask, you know, just even an icebreaker kind of question, which is like, you know, what's the last thing you read, or what do you enjoy reading? You know, and then it can turn a little bit more professional, and you can ask, like, well, you know, tell me about something that you wrote maybe last week or most recently that was for the rest of your company, you know? And, you know, I think that's not usually asked, I find, and it reveals a lot, you know, not so much what they personally read that was interesting for them. I mean, maybe something technical, but, you know, the fact that they're, you know, writing something for the rest of the company, helping them understand what's going on in engineering or what they're working on, that's something that you want to see in people that you hire. And it's something, of course, that you can get people to do, but if it's already something that's a natural part of who they are, you know, that's an extra point. So that's easier. You know, I know also that Zapier does an end of week update where each of their devs, they will write something that, write an update basically about what they got done that week and what they're going to do the next week. And, you know, obviously there's, you know, the daily stand-up that you do, but that's mostly within engineering. The communication that I think helps a lot is not just within engineering, but, you know, from engineering out to the rest of the company. So, you know, for that, you can create a Slack channel that's like an engineering, like engineering insiders, for instance. And that helps other teams inside the company, like sales or support, you know, other groups that really depend on engineering, to find out what's going on with them. You know, what is coming out, what are they working on, and the more communication you can have, the better. But you know, for my companies, we also will rely additionally on short updates and end of sprint demos. And this is a great opportunity for the engineers to show off their work to the rest of the company. It usually happens on Friday, like I said, at the end of a sprint, which is usually 2 weeks. And here they can show some of the work that they're doing. And it gives them credit, right? Because, you know, it lets the rest of the company see that you know, it's actually a real person that's working on this. And you know, they feel good about what they're putting out. And it's also good for them to see that the rest of the company really does care about what they're working on and that they depend on it.
Sure. I think that sometimes we interpret someone doing their job as what they were supposed to do this day or whatever it may be. And that could come in any industry. But I think that the ultimate kind of topic that we were addressing there, promoting good communication, promoting the harmony amongst teams, and also recognizing someone when they've done a good job, recognizing when someone maybe hasn't done a satisfactory job, and how we address that. And I'm sure we'll cover that in later in the conversation. But I think productivity is really at the core of what you were mentioning there. And sometimes when people do the group lunches or happy hours or social oriented events, sometimes it feels like you're taking away from company time, or what more could we have done if we hadn't spent that 1 hour on X activity, Nerf gun fight in the office. What would you say the most important step for a company to take these social aspects into mind, but also being geared towards improving productivity? What would you say the most important step towards that is?
Yeah, well, first, Nerf gun fights and other things like that are really important in the company too. So, and what you pick as a gun is really important. There's some new guns that have these bullets that they're not as soft, so they hit a little bit harder. So maybe stay away from those, but they are pretty awesome guns. So anyway, whole separate topic, separate webinar I'm doing next week.
Future event.
On Nerf guns. So be sure to tune in on that one. To answer your question, strangely, it's about the perception, because there are two things that are happening in parallel here. And, there's the perception that the rest of the company has of the progress of the engineering team. And then there's the actual progress. So, the first thing I do besides establishing core values for a company, if there aren't any, or if they're, if not what I consider good ones, is implementing transparency. Transparency is really important for the company. I've already talked about that a little bit, but and as I already mentioned, doing demos at the end of your sprint, you want to get good feedback from the rest of the company. Something I didn't mention is when you do the demos, you want to encourage the audience to ask questions. And then when the demo is over, you want to encourage the company to ask about things that they cared about too. Like, what did you hope to hear about, here? And somebody always answers or asks from the audience. They're always like, yeah, I have this bug that's been outstanding for like 3 weeks and it's killing me. And it may be a little bit painful to find out about those in that meeting, in that setting, when we're trying to sort of enjoy the fruits of our labor for the past sprint. But you need to learn about those things wherever you can. And if it happens to come up there, great. I mean, it's obviously a really important thing and something that somebody's thinking about. So you want to take note of that. So as a leader, when you encourage those kinds of questions and in that setting, take notes, right? Be ready to take notes and remember what people are asking about. And then the other thing I also already mentioned was the Slack channel. And so that's the other part is, really getting people to talk about what's going on and what's been decided to leave for, for later. That's where all the communication happens between the two groups, between engineering and then other groups like sales and support. I really encourage that channel, because if sales or support comes across an issue, they should put up a little red, and this is an icon in Slack. It's like a red, fire alarm going off. You want them to put that there so that they pay attention, and also like put that there, and then engineering will pick that up, and they'll see that something's going on. Something you didn't ask about, but I think is really important, I'll mention quickly, is how you break up your engineering team, because when you have your regular, sort of feature production team working on sprints, you generally want to have them not interrupted. But things happen in the company, right? You have like some scaling issue, or you'll have some bug, or maybe there's something that broke for a client, or maybe you have something else like, sales has something that's like, we really want to close this deal, but this client needs this particular feature to close the deal, and I really want it's simple. And I really want to put it in place. You don't want to interrupt, if possible, you don't want to interrupt your engineering team for that. So what I do is I will create and operate a small operations group, and that may be like 1 to 2 people. And their purpose is to handle bugs that are coming in from that channel and other things that are important, or to handle, kind of last minute requests and things that just need to be handled that you don't want your regular production team to be interrupted with. And so the ideal thing there is to have people swap in and out of that operations team every couple of weeks, because you don't want people to just be there for, for weeks or months. They'll feel like they're just firemen and or firefighters and just, burning it at both ends, and they're not going to be happy long term. So, and when you have regular production feature staff, going into that group, and they'll look at the bugs and see how much they impact people, they're going to gain some empathy, about what's happening, and they'll take that back to the feature teams, and they'll continue to evolve on that.
Sure. I love the idea of cross-functional exposures and trainings and taking a walk in someone else's shoes, because we get really comfortable in our own shoes, and sometimes seeing things from a different perspective can be really enlightening for an organization as a whole. And kind of on that note, with us being remote for the past 6 months, it's been really easy for my own team included, and I'm sure teams all across the country, to kind of feel like sometimes they are not as connected as they are to the other functions of the business, whether that be a coffee machine chat or somebody walking to the restroom, seeing somebody in the hall and asking them how their weekend was. With these webinar or the WebEx meetings, Zoom meetings, so many different technologies that we're using for our meetings and our calls these days, it's really easy to find yourself 3 months into speaking to no one but the folks that are on your team. I think that communication amongst teams is really important to a company's overall mission and the culture of the organization as well. And it's something that I know that we've all struggled with for quite some time. But with everybody being remote right now, how are you ensuring that your teams feel connected to the company and to the company's overall mission?
Yeah. When you can get together, having a retreat, if you're normally a remote company, then getting together for a retreat is really important. And at that retreat, it can be a week long or whatever you can afford if you have that budget. It's good to get together and have a hackathon. I've seen teams try to plan, an agenda and it's good to have things to talk about. And it's a good time to have the CEO talk about the big goals and the share and the losses and the wins and that kind of coming together. But the majority of the time is good to have, to work together, side by side to do something of a project or just to have a hackathon on whatever people want to work on. Those are a lot of fun, and I've seen some incredible things come out of those, not just for my companies, but for other companies. I think maybe even Gmail came out of something like that. As you're at home and sort of separated, I want to remind managers that it's their job to pay attention to their direct reports and to check in with them, because it's the manager's job to make sure that they're doing well and that they're on track, and that they're staying connected, right? Sort of a mental health kind of thing, checking in on them, because the daily stand-up or the demos or retros, those are good, important times. But they're rarely discussions about personal things, right? And that's where really the one-on-one is like super important. You want to get them to see the bigger picture, so checking in is really important. But as a manager, you want to make sure, like I said, that they're doing well, that they're doing okay, and that they're staying connected to the rest of the company.
It's tricky because I know that with additional responsibilities, tons of hats being worn, tons of reporting to do, tons of your own personal tasks to take care of throughout the day-to-day work, it's sometimes difficult to find the time to make sure, especially with a larger team, that you are finding the time to sit down with each individual to make sure that not only the work that they anticipate to complete this week is actually being taken care of, but also to do a mental health, almost a sanity check with these people, especially as your commute went from Anderson Mill Road down 183 to Mopac to downtown, as now it's from the bedroom to the kitchen to grab a Pop-Tart, to the kitchen table, and back to the bedroom. It becomes Groundhog Day. I'd be curious, and I'm sure a lot of other folks would be as well. What does the structure of a one-on-one look like, and what are some of the topics that you cover in a one-on-one?
Yeah. Yeah. Usually I would listen to podcasts or something great, like Masters of Scale is fantastic. I'm not answering your question. Sorry. And now I just don't have time for them. Now I have to do yard work to get to my podcast, and it's
A honey-do list.
yeah, exactly. So, I say for the one-on-ones, the number one thing is that you should make sure that you have your biweekly meetings. You can have them once a week, you can have them every 3 weeks or whatever, but I wouldn't go longer than that. I generally try to have them every other week. And that kind of usually works nicely with a 2-week sprint. So, the other thing I would say is that before I get into what I cover in my one-on-ones is that you don't want to miss them. And I know that everyone, like you tell someone, hey, don't miss your one-on-ones, they're important. They'll be like, yeah, I know. But I've been on both sides of this, and it's really important not to miss your one-on-ones and also to be fully focused on someone. A one-on-one can take 30 minutes or longer because you're just, kind of hanging out. Don't make it a hangout. Make it purposeful, right? There are things that you want to cover in that, and I'm going to tell you what I think is a good list. But you're there for a reason. One, you do want to be relaxed and to chat and sort of find out what's going on and that kind of thing. But don't confuse that for just a hangout time, right? Because with hangout time, they may be chatting with you, and like, as their manager, you may be like leaning back in your chair and like on your cell phone while you're like, yeah, I'm listening. Or, oh, somebody's pinging me about something. Set aside the time. It's important. Don't be on your phone. I don't care who you are. You're the CEO, great. You need to make time for them. They're there to make time for you. And you need to respect that. And it will also pay you back dividends, I think, because when you focus on them and you're listening to them and you're engaged in that conversation, it won't last that long. It'll be like maybe 15 minutes if it's impactful. And with that, they'll understand, they'll realize, and they'll appreciate that you're spending that focused time just with them. And when you're focused and paying attention to them, they'll want to make you happy. And that's really what you want as an engineering leader, is you want to be in a place where they want to make you happy. They shouldn't, in my opinion, they shouldn't be afraid of you. They should want to make you happy. And that is a controversial topic, and some things don't work for everyone. And I get that, people are different. But I mean, personally, I try not to manage people. I put processes in place that cover all those things. For me, I try to inspire them. And a lot of that comes out in the one-on-one. So to start off, I want to have a good opening communication with them. Just say like, when I do my one-on-ones, I also take notes. And they're just super quick notes so that I'm still paying attention to them. But, I want to follow up on things that they were doing already. And there are a number of really good reasons for that. You want to, when you follow up with them, it shows them that you are paying attention to what they're working on. And, like I said, they'll want to make sure they're making good progress. So another reason that you're listening for things is you want to have the opportunity to prioritize things for them. Lots of teams, lots of individual, like whether they're managers or they're individual contributors, they're going to have different things fall on their plate, right? Everyone's really busy, and like, if you talk to any engineer, they've usually got a few different things going on at the same time. You want to help prioritize things for them, because they may not realize that one of the things that they're working on is not that important for the rest of the company. And you want to help relieve that time for them and let them work on something that's more impactful.
Sure.
You also want to remove obstacles. So, if there's anything that they may tell you, like, hey, this is really dragging me down, you want to clear the path for them to be successful. And being a good listener, you want to listen for things that are getting in their way that they may not tell you that they need, right? So when you're listening, you see that there's something impacting them, whether it's a tool or a process or getting access to talk to someone, make it happen. Right. So then there's team dynamics. There may be something that comes up, like how they're working with someone else. You want to listen for things that are kind of friction points that you can get out of the way. There's also, you want to step back and look at the career progression. And this is really important because, you know, you're looking at their day to day and their week to week, and you're kind of laser focused on the details. But you also want to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, because when they get out of that meeting and they think about life, or they're driving home or walking to their bedroom, they're going to think about, what's the big picture here? What am I doing? Because like everyone worked really hard, but two things that are happening in parallel all the time is my day-to-day details and the years that are going by. And the long-term planning is about the year, the years going by, right? You want to make sure that you're planning for the long term for them, and you want to make sure that they know you're paying attention to their career and how it's shaping up. That brings me to another topic that we can leave for a little bit later, but that's the individual contributor track versus the managerial track. There are some misconceptions there about how far you can go and what's best for everyone. We can talk about that later, but last 2 points. So you want to make sure that you get feedback. I always try to ask, how am I doing, right? As your manager, like, please be open. Like, this is your opportunity. And by then, hopefully you have a good relationship with them and they understand that, you're not going to retaliate as long as it's reasonable, right? Of course, I mean, whatever feedback they give you, you're in a good, comfortable setting, and they're going to ask you, they may make a comment or make a suggestion. Take that to heart, write it down. And then the last thing is just getting to know each other, right? You want to make sure that it's a relaxed setting. You don't seem too much like you're checking off your checklist, be there, be in the moment. So that's it.
You've touched on some really popular topics there. And I know we were talking about what you cover on one-on-ones. And one of the questions that we're most frequently presented from our clients here in Austin is hiring talent. First of all, just like you alluded to earlier, engineering talent is expensive. Not to mention, if we have a team of 5, forget it if you got a team of 20. So how do we keep people? How do we retain the talent that we're able to get through the door? And so many of the things you've talked on there, whether that being communication, guidance and prioritization from the leadership or manager. One thing that really stuck out to me was career progression. And I think oftentimes in a city like Austin, and I'm sure across the states as well, is if someone sees that they don't know what their next job is, they can't see what their future promotions look like, they don't see the long-term vision of the organization, as soon as that shiny dangly carrot is hung in front of them, then they're going to investigate it. And I think that's human nature. So I think that the fact that you've touched on how can you continue to keep someone involved, keep someone focused, know what their next milestone is, what the benchmarks are, that's really, really big, and things around promotion that should be covered very frequently. And Jody, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, we have a few questions for the audience. So I wanted to see if you guys wanted to find out from them about how often we should be having one-on-ones, or if you wanted to go ahead and ask them the question before you answer and give away the answer, Richard, about progression in your career.
Yeah, let's see what the audience says.
All right, audience, we would love to know from you guys how often you should have one-on-ones. Your team might look a little bit different. So is it weekly for you, bi-weekly, monthly? Maybe you have a really large team, it's hard to get around. Quarterly, maybe you're international. Maybe you don't know what a one-on-one is. We are looking to hear from you.
We'll let this roll for 30, 60 seconds. Let everybody get a response in here.
Yeah, we got 60% so far have voted. All right.
Yeah, that's a really important topic, having one-on-ones, and it's easy to miss them, and it's easy to I mean, depending on how you had one-on-ones with your manager and kind of what you learned about doing them yourself, they can be pretty unstructured, and if you're really structured, they can feel kind of robotic. So it's good to strike a nice kind of balance. You want to be focused also.
It shouldn't feel like something that's a chore, and I think oftentimes it's interpreted that way. Wow, check that out. Weekly one-on-ones, which is awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, that's important. And you know, I see that that biweekly is a close second. And you know, I think when I've heard feedback from people that they want to have weekly one-on-ones instead of biweekly, that's fine too. Depending on your team size, you may not be able to get around to everyone every single week, so it depends on size. But hopefully you have a manageable size that you can do weekly one-on-ones. For that, I would say, you know, having like 15 minutes is perfect for that, because you know you want to make sure like you're going to be covering the daily stand-up kinds of things, but that will also give you the opportunity to check on some things a little bit more regularly. And I think that the reason people want weekly one-on-ones is so that they can just like not have something get away from them. You know, that's just like, you know, maybe something they're afraid that something will take 2 weeks before they discover, you know, something. Um, and that's probably maybe even a little more important right now because we're, you know, we're not in the same office, right? And so like lots of times, sometimes things will come up, you know, in passing at the hallway or whatever, and things like that will just come up. But maybe it's more important right now to have weekly one-on-ones, you know, whatever you feel comfortable with. And I think for me, rather than how often you're having them, it's that you're having them and also what you're covering in them. So yeah, really
Sure.
interesting to see. I'm
Yeah,
surprised by that.
that's great. Another really, really popular topic that we're faced with and we're asked quite frequently, I'd love to get your thoughts on, would be how to handle low performers, and kind of in line with the one-on-one topics. This is something that we've all encountered, and it's something that's never fun or easy to address. So I'm curious what you do in situations where you are tasked with having to handle a performance management or someone that's not performing to expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you first think about a low performer, like you've seen something, there's been a situation, or you've noticed something like, you know, maybe you started measuring velocity and the velocity for someone's been extremely low. Maybe that normally they're like, you know, doing really well or leading the team. And then all of a sudden you'll have a week or so, maybe a week or two where it's just like really, really low and their updates don't reflect that, or maybe there's some other situation. So, you know, before you make too many assumptions on things, you know, people have a life and they have other things going on and you just want to get some background, right? Maybe it's something you can help them with, or maybe you can help others understand, or maybe you can shift some responsibilities around. Um, but you really, it's about trying to understand what's going on with them. So, you know, really what I do is the timing is important for this. Maybe it's the 1-minute manager in me that's surfacing, but I want to you know, really try to deal with something as soon as possible. So as soon as you notice something or as soon as you hear something, you want to find out about it right away. So timing's important. Schedule that one-on-one ASAP. And when you do, you know, they might already be aware of something. Like if you know, if I'm an engineer and I've had a couple of awful weeks, or I've had a bad week, or something else has happened, I probably know about that already, right? And you know, you as my manager, when you come to ask me, you know, for, you know, just for a chat, that's one of the first things that may come to my mind is, you know, that thing I said to someone, or you know, my productivity. So I'm already going to be thinking about it. So really, I open up by just like giving them the floor. You know, I kind of ask, I will, you know, just go into it by saying, you know, yeah, I just wanted to chat with you. You know, I've noticed, you know, X, and you know, I just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on it, and just let them start talking. And you know, don't explain too much because they're anxious to probably talk about it. So you just want to let that flow. And then one tip I would give you here is when there's a pause in that conversation. So when they're telling you and then they pause, they're really thinking through that situation. So resist the urge to pick up the conversation. Like let that sit for a second. You know, it may seem like it's an uncomfortable, you know, 3 to 5 seconds of a gap. It's not that bad. Just kind of like make sure that they get everything out, because they're, like I said, they're thinking through it. So as they're telling you, they're like tracing their steps and they're thinking about it. And often what I find is after that pause, they will come to a conclusion that will save you steps in getting them there. Like they will think about something and they'll be like, I probably shouldn't have said that, or, really the problem is such and such. Instead of you like getting that out of them, you want them to come to that conclusion and you want them to tell you, right? It'll make them feel better about that too. So, resist that urge, just give them the opportunity to talk. I will also say that you want to be short and direct, about the initial part of starting that conversation. Don't be afraid, and by it being short and direct, don't worry about that being confrontational. I think the way I say it is courteous confrontation. You want to just be direct with it. Don't go on and on like I'm going right now. So, you want to get to the root of the problem, right? As they're telling you about it, listen for, cut out all the noise, cut out all the emotion. And when they're done talking, you want to repeat for them what you think you heard that is the root of the problem. Don't go into all of the emotional detail, especially if it involves someone else. And then once you kind of agree on the root of the problem, you want to work on a solution together. So that's a really important step because it needs to come from both of you. You don't just hear their side and go, okay, I hear what you're saying. Here's what you're going to do. You are going to work from the office only, and there's no working from home for you, ever again or whatever. Like, talk to them about it. Give them the opportunity. Let's work on a solution together. They'll feel better about it. And then after that, let them go with it. Follow up with whatever's appropriate at the end of the week, maybe the next week, however much time you think that they need to, have a few days under their belt with this new plan. And if you see any kind of progress at all with them, you want to recognize that for them and you want to reward them. This is very important because if you had a conversation with them about something that they're doing or not doing that they need to change, if you see any kind of progress, they need to know that you have noticed that, right? And you want to reward that. You're not going to be rewarding them every single week for the rest of their career here, on this one thing, right? It's steps to make improvements, and the reward will vary based on what you're talking about. Maybe you cut something out that you didn't let them do for a little while, and then when they improve, give it back to them, right? Or maybe reward them with something else that they wanted. Maybe they wanted to, like lead a meetup or have time for doing something else or mentoring or something else. You want to allow them to do that after a while if you can do it. So that's what I suggest.
I think that we have, as leaders, sometimes have a trained eye to notice the things that don't make us happy, notice the things that aren't quite in line with our expectations. I think you've made a good point in that recognizing and rewarding when progress is being made, even if it's not quite to the expectation, it's a step in the right direction, and you're incentivizing and rewarding the activity that you're looking for more of, or the attitude or the mentality or effort that you're looking forward to or looking for. Another kind of point on that topic that I am personally guilty of is we look for the things that don't fall in line with standards. We look for the low performers so that we can proactively address these things, I think is the end goal. But we don't always recognize or speak with or do one-on-ones with those folks that really are contributing, carrying their own weight, if not more, those high performers. Do you do anything different or special or specifically for the high performers on your team?
But first, I think it was Jody, were you going to say something?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we've got a really good question that falls in line with this topic right now from the audience. Phillips Hun, he asks, Richard, how do you deal with senior engineers who are not agreeing with your policies, instructions, or approaches?
Yeah. Right. So I recognize Philip. Was it Philip?
Phillips, yeah.
Okay, Philip. So thanks for your question. That's one I've definitely heard before. And immediately what I'm thinking about is maybe you entered a situation where a lot of these people that you're managing now already existed. Or maybe, you're in this role now where, you have a plan to make something better and maybe senior management is not exactly agreeing with you. So Number one, I would say that, hopefully you've talked to them, and that you want to understand why they're saying that, and really like dig into that. And because especially if you're starting to manage this team, and it's kind of new to you, you really want to understand where they're coming from. They may have some information about the team or what they've seen before that is may cause your new plan to fail. So you definitely want to listen to that. Of course, there are also situations where people will say, we tried that last year and it didn't work, and here's why. Well, the here's why is really important. Even if they don't tell you, you want to ask about that, because there may be something different about the way that you're going to implement this. That's really important. And it depends on what they're pushing back on too. It may be that they're pushing back on, like, we've done Kanban forever, we don't need to do Agile Scrum, or we like Waterfall, or, maybe there's something like that they're kind of challenging. It's also about their own experience. And if you have had a lot of success implementing this somewhere else, then, the way that you run things is going to be a little bit different. So I guess when you're talking to them, if you've gone through all these steps and you evaluated, like, what you're going to do and how you want to implement that, and you still want to do it, then I would get them together and I would say, I've heard the reasons, and they're very valid, and it's helped me change my plan a little bit, right? You want to make sure that they know that you're listening to them. And so I've changed my plan, and here's what how I think we can adapt to this. But let me tell you what I'm going after. Here's why I'm implementing this plan. And you talk about the reasons and what you're hoping to see and how you're going to measure them. Because if you measure them and you're not getting the results that you're expecting out of your plan, then you'll need to adjust. And that will include, especially senior management, or senior engineers, that will include them. Because, they're also, I see them as partially responsible for kind of guiding the vision, and the mentorship of the group, right? So you want to make sure that you're including them. But I would say the last piece of that, when you say, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, is you want them to trust you, and you want to tell them that, I would say, this plan is not going to be successful. Nothing's going to be successful unless we're all in this together. As an engineer, as a baseline engineer in this group, it's your responsibility to challenge other ideas. So I'm glad that you brought this to my attention. And we will talk about it. And sometimes there's a decision that needs to be made, right? And as the leader of the group, I'm going to make that. For better or worse, this is where we're going with it. But once a decision is made, we all need to get behind it. And I think Amazon has some pretty good principles on some of these areas. But once you've talked about it and a decision is made, you all need to get behind it and support it 100%. So ask them for your support, or ask them to support you, and for trust too, and that you'll measure.
Nice. Thank you, Phillips. Thank you, Richard. I'm curious, and I think we have a poll question coming up in a moment as well, specifically around kind of our topic on low performers and high performers, and a manager's responsibility in these situations. But I would love to get your input specifically for the attendees on what the relationship with a high performer looks like, and how you would differ communications or your one-on-ones or your strategy in approaching these folks. Because sometimes the folks that put up the most resistance to Philip's question are those members that do have experience from another organization, that do have some pretty good ideas and are willing to push that envelope a little bit because they know they've seen it work in other instances. So how do you relate to those folks that are typical high performers on your team?
Yeah, so I'll lead into this by saying that one of the top mistakes that I see engineering managers make at any level, director, engineering manager, VP, CTO, they wind up ignoring their high performers, and this is sort of our impression of basically how we learn to be managers, is that you want to stamp out the problems, right? As a manager, I look at the issues happening in my org, and I find the problems, and I correct them, right? And that's what I'm always on the lookout, is how to correct the problems. But and really what you want is, you want to get everyone, your wherever they are in their performance, you want to get them all to being high performers. So what does that mean? When you've got everyone being a high performer, does that mean you go on vacation and you don't have to deal with anything?
Right.
Absolutely not. So I want you to take that idea and think about this. With your high performers, you want them to keep performing at their best. And to do that, you need to make sure that you're spending time with them, right? And I would argue that you need to spend half of your time working on everyone, including low performers, other than high performers, and the rest of your time, like 50% of your time, dealing or working with the high performers. And here's why. Because you want to make sure that they are fulfilled, that they have plenty of good things to work on, and you want to reward them, right, with what they're working on. So real quick, what they look like, because I feel like this is always a question that comes up, is they usually have a growth mindset, right? They are they're usually pretty positive about things. They are very forward thinking. They're achievement oriented, right? They just get stuff done. They are very self-driven, right? They usually don't need you to tell them what to do. And that may give you sort of the reason for thinking that you shouldn't get involved, right? But resist that. They're going to be your workhorses, right? And it looks like they're doing 400% of what your average engineer, if I can say that fairly, is doing, right? They just seem to be doing a whole lot more. And they also usually crave constructive feedback, right? They want to know where they're not performing well. And if you're used to dealing with other things, then you may not have any answers for them. And so hopefully this next set of advice that I give you is going to help you have the right frame of mind for giving them answers where they're seeking questions, where they're seeking some guidance. So number one, you want to agree on the goals that that you want to accomplish with them, whether it's by the quarter. If you're doing traction, which hopefully you are, then there are some very clearly defined goals that you've done, that you have for them as a team. But as an individual, you want to make sure that there are clearly defined goals and you align on those expectations. And you also want to give them tools to succeed. Again, as with the one-on-one, you're listening, and they may not openly tell you, I need this tool to do my job. If they're telling you, you need to get it like yesterday. But if they're not telling you, you need to listen for them, listen for those kinds of things, and give them what they need. You also, and this is probably the most important part of all of my entire list here, is getting out of their way. That doesn't mean you don't talk to them. That means that you let them run with with whatever they need, and whoever they need to talk to, or if they need, like if they ask you for every other Friday to work on a special project, like you want to give them that. You want to give them special projects. If there's some big architectural session that you are going to need to have in like maybe a month or a few weeks, ask them to lead it. Usually they're going to spend time thinking about it and really working through it as a proof of concept or something. And then they're gonna talk about it. So give them special projects. You also want to look at opportunities for growth, right? And this kind of goes back to the individual contributor track or the managerial track, right? Because it's not just ICs that are high performers. Maybe they're managers too. So look for opportunities for growth. A players will play with A players really well. Right. So put them in touch with other people in the org. Maybe it's not just another badass that you have in engineering. Maybe you have somebody that's just, killing it in support or in QA, right? Put them together. Maybe there's somebody really, really good in your design team, put them together on a special project, come up with something, and they will come up with something, really great. You want to be flexible with them, right? They need their own space to work. And this one means more when you're working in an office. Maybe they want to work from home more. Maybe they want to work from a coffee shop, or maybe give them the room that they need. And this next one is also super, super important. And it is encouraging them to decompress. One thing about your workhorses, your high performers, is that they will go and go until they are exhausted. And you don't want them to get burned out, because then one of the things that they'll turn to is looking at another company where they can start over, where it takes time to ramp up. It's a natural thing to think about. So you want to encourage them to take time to like relax, or have time to meditate, or whatever they need to decompress, like help them do that. And then the last thing is you want to plot a path for their career advancement. Like I mentioned before, do they, what's on your list of IC? Do they want to continue to be an IC forever and end up being a CTO someday? Coach them into that as best as you can. Move them into from senior. If they're not senior, move them into senior. If they're senior, get them to principal. Maybe they're the staff engineer helping other engineers. Like, just kind of feel that out a little bit. And then if they're more on the management track, then they will, probably end up as a VPE. And I can tell you more about how I see a VPE versus a CTO, because VPEs don't necessarily end up CTOs. VPEs are very good at, they keep the trains running on time, right? So, they're good at organizing the troops and keeping things running smoothly. With CTOs, lots of times they're going to be your visionaries. They may not have anybody reporting to them. They're going to go and work all night and come back at 5 a.m. You'll see something from them that's like, here's our next big thing that we're going to build. That may be them also.
I appreciate that. And I think with 15 minutes left on the clock here, I want to cover one last topic, and I'd like to open the floor up to any questions. So guys, if you do have anything in particular, I see we've just fielded one more question. We'll cover one more topic, and then we'll open up the floor to the participant chat as well. So please send over any questions that you've got in the meanwhile. But Richard, my last question and kind of summation of all the topics that we've discussed, and we've covered a lot of ground. I get asked pretty frequently around what engineering leadership should do to really be as effective, a well-oiled machine, if you will. What would be the top 3 things that you would suggest an engineering leader do to be most effective?
Yeah. I may wind up writing an article about this because it goes kind of deep, but I'll try to make it quick. So the top 3 things I would say are, your execution ability as a leader of a group is directly equal to your team's capacity. So if you need to measure, and you need to do whatever you can to improve those measurements, because whatever your team is capable of doing is what you are telling your leadership that it's going to take to complete something, right? If they're like, hey, we want to add this thing, break it down and tell me how long you think it'll take. You have no idea what that's going to be if you don't know what your team's capacity is. So number 1, you need to establish that as soon as possible. And number 2, I would say it's directly supporting your team. You need to think about, like I mentioned before, the individual, like from your one-on-ones, think about their days and their years. They're on both tracks at the same time, and you want to shape their experience in both of these tracks. Plan the trajectory that meets their goals and your needs, right? You want to do both things at the same time. The last thing I would say is that you want to accelerate people with the right tools and the right processes. And so for that, you want to, implement something. If you don't have a CI/CD pipeline, that should be the top thing on your list, because think about the time that your engineers are spending doing their work. You want them to, if possible, you would want them to come in and write code and improve code and maybe do architectural sessions and not spend time on anything else. But in the real world, we have to deploy things, right? And if you're not a big enough company that has a whole operations team that's going to take things and deploy them, then you need to have a good CI/CD pipeline, which is really easy to do these days. You can do that on Heroku really well. You can do that on AWS or GCP. Set that up. Hire a group if you need to, like I did. I hired, what's the name of the company? I forgot. I'll come back to it in a minute. I hired a company to implement this for me, and it was really the best thing. It was the money. It was the best spent money, because sure, it may have costed like, I don't know, 20K or something to implement a good CI/CD pipeline, but once that was done, I didn't think about it anymore. You know, it's so smooth, and the engineers loved it, and we were able to roll back things. If something went out there that we didn't want to go out, we could roll it back in a snap, and it was so much better to do that instead of scrambling and worrying. Like, that adds to engineers unhappy. They have a little bucket for things that the company does that makes them unhappy, and that will go into that bucket, and you don't want that.
Beautiful. I appreciate you covering that with us, Richard. And sure enough, we do have some questions streaming in from the chat. So Jody, you want to see what we got?
Yes. So from Robert, we have, what was one of the most challenging team predicaments you've encountered, such as bad communication or differences in philosophy, and how did you resolve it?
One of the most challenging team predicaments.
Don't use any names.
Yeah. You know, I would say that that may be part of the story that I have in my fire engineering team. That was really interesting. That's probably why I wrote about it. But you know, it was where the leadership was really disconnected with the engineering staff, and I'm sure that they were one step away from getting rid of people that they didn't need to get rid of. You know, when I started a company, or when I'm consulting somewhere, you know, I do an audit. I evaluate people, process, and infrastructure. And when I looked at, you know, hearing that, and they're like, I mean, the guy I talked to is only too ready to like get rid of them. I mean, it would have happened like on a call, like right away. But I gained his trust and asked him to just give me a couple of weeks to figure things out. And after my audit, yeah, I dug in, and I found that it was really the processes were more at fault than the people. You know, they hired some exceptional people. They were really, really smart engineers. And even if they're, you know, they're not like super talented, you know, Tony Stark engineers, then, you know, they need the right encouragement. They need the right inspiration and the right tools. So that was just digging in and finding, you know, what the right solution was.
Perfect. And we also have Phillips again. He's got a few questions, so they'll kind of tail off of each other. But he wants to know, how do you usually measure an engineer's performance? And is it supposed to be purely relying on deliverables or milestones? Or what about the other types of contributions that maybe aren't necessarily geared towards that milestone or deliverable mark?
You cut out a little bit. Let me go find that. So what are let me go find it, sorry.
No worries.
How do I usually measure engineering performance, right? Okay, so here's the thing is I always encourage measuring, right? You definitely need to measure. You need to have a good process in place where you measure your whole team, because you want to reward your whole team as a team. And so everything you think about and you set up, even from your sprint planning, and that you try not to pre-assign tickets to people, you want to just go have them pick tickets off the top of the list. That is more of a team kind of setting, right? But in terms of measuring an engineer's performance, you know, once you have those kinds of metrics and processes in place, and you feel good about them, you want to look at their contribution. You know, where are they in their career, right? First, if they're an engineer, then they're doing, then they're taking care of tickets and doing programming. And so you want to look at the quality, right? And this should be one of your metrics, is when code is released into production, did it come back, right? Was there a bug with it? What's that ratio look like? And you know, how well are they communicating and coordinating with other engineers and also with the rest of the company? And And I would also say that, with their, that making deliverables and their milestones is important, right? That's an easy metric to look at and measure. But the way to look at their code quality, I would say, is to do code reviews yourself. If you're still pretty in touch with the language or the framework, you want to do that yourself. But you also want to probably talk to other people, and don't do that in kind of a bad way where, like you ask somebody like, so how's so-and-so doing? Because it could be a political thing right away. You don't want that. You just kind of want to pick up on things and say like, how are you working with the team? Like, what do you think about the team? And sometimes things will come out. So, getting sort of a 360 scope on that is really useful.
Nice. Does anybody else in the audience have a question for Richard?
Harlan has just put a question into Q&A, which I didn't even know was a function until he did that. So I appreciate that. And Harlan says, how can I sense when a top engineer is at risk of leaving, especially now that we're all remote and virtual? That's got to be difficult, I'm sure.
Yeah, that is really, as a manager, as a leader, you're always worried about that, right? You always want to, you're a coach, right? And you need to think about the company, even for yourself, as a team, not as a family. Because number one, I'm going off track a little bit here, but as a family, you will expect your family members to accept you no matter what. That's 100% not what happens here, right? What happens here is that you're a team, right? And you can have sort of that team, that family feeling as a member of your soccer team or your football team, but you're there to perform, right? And the coach is there to make sure that you're doing your best, right? And they're going to be looking out for you, but it's all about the performance. So don't forget that. And so so to come back really to your question, which is, how do I know when an engineer is looking? Number one, I would say, try to do more goal setting and talking to them and spending time like working with them. Are they looking? Yeah, they're probably always looking. And they have friends that work at other companies, and in this day and age, like, people work at different companies and then like, oh, hey, I have an opportunity. I want to call my friend Steven to see if he'll work with me. Like, trust that that's happening all the time. But just like jealousy in a relationship, you can't worry about that, okay? You've only got just to take care of your own stuff. Be confident in what you're doing and what you have. And if you're not confident in that, you need to get there, because you need to think about, and I know that sounds empty, but you need to think about, what am I offering? What am I offering my engineers, all of them, that they either can't get somewhere else, or that they would just be foolish to leave, right? You want to create that kind of an environment for them. So, do your best, and that will give you confidence in what you have. And if you're doing your best in providing, making sure the communication is good, the visibility that they get is good, if you've got all those things solved that we've been talking about this whole time, and you still have like a top engineering person that is, that wants to leave, they're going to leave anyway. And there's nothing you can do about that. So I guess hopefully that allies the fear a little bit. It's going to be there, but all you can do is take care of the stuff that makes a great engineering org, and that it's seen positively in the company. And as an engineering leader, no matter what role you're at, whether you're just an engineering manager or you're the VPE or the CTO, it's your job to highlight the work that the engineers under you are doing to the rest of the company.
That was powerful.
That
was awesome, Richard. Yeah. That's a good way to take us out, I think, as well. And what I will do is, after the conclusion of today's webinar, we will be sending out a recording of Richard's webinar specifically on don't fire your engineering team. Let's make them better. But this is something that you can share with friends, share with colleagues. Please distribute it amongst anybody that you think could make sense. We'd love to get your guys' thoughts on the content of the webinar, we are always seeking to improve our leaders in tech functions for managers, leaders, thought leaders here in Austin. We will also be sending over additional resources, including access to some of Richard's other articles posted on Medium. He's pumping these things out left and right these days, so there's always something new. Don't forget to give him a clap if you read it and like it. And also, we will
And that means
always...
that you scroll, sorry to interrupt, that means that you scroll down usually to the bottom of that, and there's a little hand. I don't know why, I was telling my wife, I don't know why Medium hides that, but Medium helps contribute pennies when somebody, or a little bit when people clap, so maybe that's why they hide it. But anyway, please do clap for me, and you have to find it. But one more thing I want to mention, because I feel like people are gonna be dropping off pretty quickly, is that company that I just blanked out on, I don't know why, because I've worked with them so much, is Onyx. You know, they have been fantastic. And then the other company that I've worked with is Fastly. Both of those companies are super awesome in terms of providing you with services. I'm not trying to give them a plug here. It's just, I feel like, you know, those are the companies that I was thinking about when I was talking about that. And I'd just be super sad if I didn't mention them, so.
No, that was awesome. Thank you, Richard. And also, if you attended today and have any further follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out to an Austin Fraser representative. I'm sure Richard would be happy to hear from you. Also, we're always looking for new hosts, new topics, new ideas. If you heard something today you'd like to learn more about, don't hesitate to reach out and plant that seed, because we are constantly wanting to improve these events and make them better for yourself and your communities. But Richard, thank you very much for your time and covering this stuff with us. Attendees, thank you for coming and participating. And that concludes this installment of Leaders in Tech.
Thank you so much, everyone. And feel free to reach out to me if you need anything, available on LinkedIn or other channels. So again, thank you, Austin Fraser, for this platform. And I appreciate you all. So this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks all. See ya.